Welcome back to the Top Notch Documentaries YouTube channel. In today's Israel Keys video, I'm going to be discussing some of the other serial murderers that influenced Israel. These individuals include Ted Bundy, Gary Ridgway, and H. Holmes. Hope you enjoy. Let's start off with Ted Bundy. Keys loved Bundy because he is the most well-known US serial killer, and I feel like Keys was trying to reach his level of infamy. On being apprehended and then subsequently linked to the Chi Omega House killings in Florida, the public was baffled. Bundy was good looking, had a charismatic personality, and didn't look like a typical murderer. Bundy garnered media attention because of his unexpected serial killer activities, and he would travel extensively throughout Washington state, utilising the highways. He drove through many states, and Bundy had a distinct type of victim which differs from Israel, whose type would change, and that was a quote from Israel. Keys would have been influenced by Ted Bundy. Like Bundy, Keys was arrogant, drove thousands of miles, and lived in Washington state. Keys would have picked up different techniques to avoid apprehension as he studied Ted Bundy, along with true crime books, and knew what not to do in order to become a successful active serial killer. As mentioned, Israel didn't have a victim type. He could have been influenced by Bundy on this. Police wouldn't pick up on case similarities as easy. Israel realised that doing things close to home would have him being apprehended in no time. Therefore, he should travel across multiple states just like Bundy. Bundy knew where to hunt for victims also. Universities and neighbourhood areas along with Lake Sammamish State Park. Altering Bundy's blueprint ever so slightly made Israel a truly dangerous serial killer. And don't forget, a likely victim of Keys vanished from the University of Albany in 1998, and check out my video on that, and that was potential victim Suzanne Lyle. Also, confirmed victims Bill and Lorraine Currier vanished from a neighbourhood area. Now let's move on to Gary Ridgway, known as the Green River Killer. Ridgway differed from Bundy because he targeted female sex workers and vulnerable young women, typical runaways. When bodies of young women began turning up in the Green River, which is located in Washington state, police knew that a serial killer was on the loose. Ridgway was finally caught in 2001 and subsequently convicted of 49 killings, and he's suspected of many more. The case was active as Israel was coming of age, and the media were intrigued by the shocking revelations of more bodies being found month after month and year after year. Israel was influenced by Ridgway. He admitted to burying a cache of guns and money near Green River, Wyoming in 2007 or 2008. Could this have been an homage to Ridgway? Israel also sought out prostitutes, though he never confessed to murdering any, and any vulnerable young woman would have made the ideal prey for a predator like Israel. Ridgway and Keys both came from religious households, and Ridgway was obsessed with the Bible despite being a textbook example of a sinner. He would attempt to convince random people about converting to Christianity at their doorsteps, and mirrored the inner conflict that Keys was going through. This inner conflict relating to the battle between good and evil, and sure, Keys threw religion out of his life in his early teenage years, saying that it poisons people, but deep down he wanted to be accepted by his deeply religious family, and he knew that he was too far gone down the path of evil for that. And now, for the final killer influence, H. Holmes. H. Holmes is someone who Keys had studied, reading books and even watching a TV episode on the man. This killer was different to the more modern killers in the sense that he was labelled as America's first serial killer. The case stirred up sensationalist reporting, and Holmes lapped the attention up, confessing to many murders before recanting the confession as he awaited the hangman's noose. Israel loved the attention that his crimes gained and eagerly awaited any new news story or theory, the entertainment factor causing him to lose all of his control and self-protective principles. Holmes was a con man at heart, earning money through ingenious methods like insurance fraud schemes and faking deaths of associates, some of which he actually murdered as part of the schemes. Holmes purchased different items on credit and didn't plan on paying back the money. Keys heavily relied on credit also. Holmes was successful in his scams, and somewhere along the line, the murders began. Keys sounded fascinated by the case of Holmes. He had told an army buddy about a fantasy of his whereby he wanted to hold kidnapped victims in a large confined space, demanding ransom money from their families. He implied that upon receiving the money, he would take away their lives. This sounds like a plot which Holmes would have taken part in. Both are outrageous, and this speaks volumes to the sadistic minds of both Holmes and Keys. There have been many reported encounters where Keys posed as an insurance salesman, and this might have also been a Holmes influence, posing as someone you're not in order to attain your end goal. For Keyes, this could have been used as a ruse in order to kidnap someone more efficiently or for some unknown other reason. Holmes perpetrated arson on his property and then would end up travelling with an accomplice, telling the man's wife that her husband was going to fake his death in order to collect out insurance money. You likely can see how this played out. The man was murdered by Holmes and his death was declared as a suicide. Holmes was certainly a devious character, but much of his story was over-exaggerated. Keyes liked the new phenomenon of serial killers at the turn of the century, a new breed of offender who the public grew to fear and became fascinated by over time. I imagine that Keyes wanted to stand out from other killers and so grew fixated on the differences between each of these killers, becoming influenced by their crimes and tweaking his own criminal behaviour in order to remain in his own category. He admitted to investigators that he didn't feel close to any of them after all. The influence that these three offenders had on Keyes really shines through when you examine their murders and what other crimes they got up to. There's still so much unknown about Keyes, and I would imagine that he possesses even more of the same traits as these killers, having been influenced to adopt their behaviours. I'm sure that there are still even more influence similarities between Keyes and other serial killers, so if you pick up on any, be sure to leave them in the comments section below. As always, thank you for watching.